Financial leadership is changing. CFOs no longer record history. They make history. This podcast will help you become a better leader, strategic thinker, and digital visionary. Welcome to Secrets of Rockstar CFOs, the ultimate podcast for chief financial officers. Follow along as Jack McCullough engages in exciting chats with accomplished CFOs, learning how they overcame obstacles and positioned their companies for the future. Here's your host, Jack McCullough.
Hello, Rockstars, and welcome to another episode of the Secrets of Rockstar CFOs. I'm your host, Jack McCullough. Before we start out, a big shout out to our sponsors, Plantful and Travel Bank. We have a great guest today, so let's rock. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Secrets of Rockstar CFOs. I'm your host, Jack McCullough. I'm really looking forward to the guest today because this is the first time I've had a guest that I've actually known more than a year or two. Denise and I actually met, as best as I can tell, we met in the 1990s. I'm not exactly sure, but we were both part of a local CFO network. So my guest is Denise Marks. She's the CFO of the CareQuest Institute for Oral Health. And as I said, I've known her for more than a quarter of a century. Denise, welcome to the Secrets of Rockstar CFOs.
Thanks, Jack. It is great to be here, and thank you for asking me to be here. You're dating us a little bit, so I'm not sure it was that long ago, but I won't hold you to it. Yes,
Okay.
We've known each other for a long time.
2019. I remember HDFEN. Well, it's interesting because I think someone like from your comms team reached out to us and unaware that we'd known each other for a little bit. So I'm like, that's the same Denise Marks, I think. So anyway, it's great to see you and great to have you on the podcast. So I want to explore your career path and a few other things, but before we get into that, can you tell us a little about CareQuest from the 10,000-foot view?
Sure. So CareQuest Institute for Oral Health is a large nonprofit focused on improving the oral health of all. And we do that through a number of philanthropic activities and programs, including research and education and policy and advocacy and grant making, among others. And then we also have a for-profit affiliate called CareQuest Innovation Partners, which is our innovation and impact investing arm. And I oversee that as well as serving as CFO of the entire enterprise.
Oh, wow. So it's an exciting thing. And we'll talk a little about that because as far as I know, you've never worked in the nonprofit sector until this role. So we'll explore that change and what that was like. But before we get into a lot of that, I'd like to just a little about your early years. Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in a suburb of Philadelphia, in a town called Rosemont, which is right near Villanova University. And I'm one of 5 kids. I'm number 4 of 5, and lived in Pennsylvania, went to college in Pennsylvania, and then fell in love with Boston. Always loved Boston, and found my way here. And I've spent my whole career in the Boston area.
Well, in sporting events, that's a bit of a natural rivalry, Boston and Philly. Do you find yourself torn, or have you taken the Boston side at this point?
Well, so the way we've looked at it, if the Eagles and Pats might be playing in a certain Super Bowl, is that, I can't lose.
That's a fair way to look at it. So. But yeah, I mean, it's actually one of the best sports rivalries because both fan bases are fairly obnoxious. So,
It's true. It's fun to be an Eagles fan when the Eagles are winning, and it's fun to be a Pats fan when the Pats are winning. But
you get double your chances for being a happy sports fan, I suppose.
Yeah.
So, but now after high school, you studied economics in undergrad and got a master's, I believe, in accounting. And I'm curious, what about economics and the business community generally was attractive to the 17-year-old version of Denise?
Yeah. So I was actually a finance major undergrad.
Right.
With a minor in econ. And actually in high school, I started working at Merrill Lynch part-time, very part-time, in addition to working at the pharmacy of, a pharmacy chain that's no longer around. So, I spent a lot of my time in addition to doing, school and sports is working, but I really enjoyed the environment at Merrill Lynch, working with all different levels of people and kind of getting exposure to investing at a very early.
No, that sounds like a great thing. And then you graduated and you started your career at PwC. And
I did. I actually, funny enough, before that, I actually worked in a commercial bank in New England.
oh,
Before
okay.
jumping into to Price Waterhouse, I actually worked in commercial lending, asset-based lending, with a bank that has gone through multiple iterations, but it was Bank of New England at the time. I am dating myself for those from New England that remember Bank of New England, but lived through the real estate crisis and the bank being taken over by the FDIC, et cetera. And that's when I decided to go back to grad school and ultimately got a master's in accounting and MBA. And that's when I joined Price Waterhouse.
Makes sense. And then you worked for one of the most fascinating companies, but one I realize that younger people don't necessarily know, CMGI. I mean, that must have been the ride of a lifetime. I'm just surprised people like academics haven't written books about
I know,
that
I
one.
am
So
too, actually. It was an unbelievable ride, like you said. I mean, to live through the dot-com kind of boom and bust was truly an experience. I am grateful for having that opportunity. It was like dog years, literally every year was dog years. But just what I learned and being part of kind of the internet boom and bust was crazy. It was really, really crazy to be at the start of online shopping. I remember telling my partners at the time we were looking at a company called furniture.com, and I said to my partners in an investment committee, I will never buy furniture online. I literally said that statement. I will
mm,
never buy furniture online. Look today. It's just amazing, to
yeah,
think how we've changed in our buying habits. Obviously, a lot has changed from the start of the internet, but it was
yeah,
fun to be part of that journey.
I buy pretty much everything online other than food. And
Mhm.
I'll buy some foods online, but I still grocery
Yeah.
shop. And not that I buy a bunch of suits anymore, but when I do, I like to go in and try them on. I don't want to trust it, but probably at
Yeah.
some point I'll be like the only one doing that. Everybody will still be getting suits online and bringing them to their tailor. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, it must have been quite a run. And then you within the SV family, which I think is where you and I met for the first time.
I think
And
that's right.
you had a great one there before CareQuest. So I'm curious, you've had some wonderful experiences. So what are some of the lessons that you learned along the way and maybe some of the most critical mentors you've had that
Yeah.
shaped you for the current role?
Yeah, so I've been very, very fortunate to have amazing mentors, over the course of my career. I remember one of my first mentors at Bank of New England. I think she was the only woman, EVP that existed at the bank. She was an older woman, and she was a rock star. She gave me lots of sage advice about being a woman in a largely male-dominated industry like banking. And I think of her often, actually. So she was probably one of my earliest mentors at the start of my professional career. And I've been, like I said, very fortunate to have amazing mentors throughout my time at PwC. Through every actually position that I've taken, I've had both great internal advocates and mentors, as well as finding, people in the industry that I respected and would seek advice from, and forged amazing personal and professional relationships.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And when I wrote the book Secrets of Rockstar CFOs a few years ago, which it's amazing how quickly it became outdated, but just that the roles changed so much in the last 5 or 6 years. But everyone I spoke to, and I spoke to some elite CFOs, they all had a mentor. It wasn't necessarily someone in the world of finance and accounting, but they all said, yeah, it's such an underrated thing that, you learn more from your mentor than you do from anyone else except your parents, maybe. So.
Yeah, no, it's true. And actually many of my mentors have been men, some have been women. It really, finding that connection and that person that's willing to take you under their wing, and just, be there, as a guide and a sounding board is always huge. And I try to do that myself and always have as I've kind of grown in my career, making sure that, I'm kind of, playing it back and playing it forward.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Given the obviously positive impact that mentors have had on your career, are you presently or do you frequently mentor other up and coming professionals? Sort of, or is it paying it back or playing it forward? I kind of always butcher that expression, but
Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, in all of my roles, and particularly at SV, because I spent a good chunk of my career there, I've had the good fortune of serving as a mentor for a number of my staff, my direct staff, and even others that were not my direct staff, but others in the firm. And I keep in touch with many of them today. It's so important, to kind of have that person to help you navigate some of the bumps in the road, which inevitably happen.
no, that makes a lot of sense. So I want to ask you a little about your current role, but before we do get into it, an obvious question, at least to me, is, and as I research it, what a wonderful mission you have, but what was it that was compelling to you that made you, give up the traditional corporate career for a mission-focused organization?
Yeah. I left SV at the end of 2019, after a great ride there. I adore, my former partners and colleagues. I still am very, very close to many of them, but for a variety of reasons, it was time for me to move on. And so my plan was to take a break, maybe 6 months a year, figure out what I wanted to do when I grew up. And to be honest, I was not hunting for this role. I was introduced through, funny enough, it connected through more than one thing where, multiple people said, you have to meet this organization or you have to meet this person at this organization. And it just, the dots connected. And the more I learned about what we were doing and where the organization was at a major inflection point, I felt really like I couldn't say no. So it was just over 4 years. It was 4 years in September that I've been with
Wow,
CareQuest.
because I sort of vaguely recall when you joined, and geez, that was 4 years ago, huh? Wow.
Yeah,
It,
crazy. Time
yeah,
flies.
it goes by quickly. So I'm curious now, does, again, being sort of not sort of, with a mission-focused organization,
Yeah.
does that change how you approach your role as the CFO?
Not at all.
No?
I would say, the activities that the organization is engaged in is, slightly different than, what I've been involved with previously, but I like to build things. Every time I joined an organization, whether it was CMGI Adventures or CareQuest, it was, or SV actually, at the time I joined SV, it was always starting on some new major inflection point for the organization. And at CareQuest in particular, it was going through a major reorganization. We were looking to build the team, build our operating capabilities separate from, a former affiliated company that we owned that did all shared services previously, a very large company. And it was the opportunity to build a team, build systems, and really drive the strategic direction of the organization, including building a leadership team from scratch. I was the second member of the executive team after the CEO to join. And so we really, it was a startup. And I like, the entrepreneurial nature. We are fast. We are not a sleepy nonprofit. We are doing a lot of different things and moving at a really fast pace. And so we were 36 people when I joined, and now we're over 100. So pretty dramatic growth in a lot of ways, not just personnel in that time frame.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I wanted to get your philosophy on building a team, because I know as long as I've known you, you've always taken a lot of pride in the people who've worked for you. So what is your approach to building a team in finance and accounting? And even you probably have tentacles outside of the F&A world as well.
Yeah. So, particularly in a smallish company, you need to hire. My philosophy is I want field players. I want people that can think strategically, but aren't afraid to roll up their sleeves, that they're willing to wear lots of hats. You're moving at a fast pace. And, people that are willing to take on new challenges and grow and be challenged, in a good way. So those are the types of people I want on my team. It can't be stagnant, even in a nonprofit like CareQuest Institute. We are tackling big challenges. And we need people that are embrace that. Sometimes working at a startup or a rapidly growing company, you need to embrace the chaos that exists, and make sense out of the chaos. And that's kind of the fun part, I think. So
Yeah.
finding people that think and operate that way is the key.
So if I were to give Hamara a call and ask what your leadership approach was, would she say good things?
I hope so. I think she would. I
Yeah,
think she
no.
would. She worked for me a gazillion years ago at PwC. And I'm fortunate to just have brought her on in the last 6 months as my controller here.
Yeah, she's great. She actually audited me.
Oh,
So
there you go.
yeah. So so that's how she and I met back in the day. So and she was
Yeah.
still at PwC then. So but yeah, she's great. So but cool. So one thing that my members ask me all the time, and I'd love to get your perspective on this, is how do you build a relationship with the CEO? Now, I know you have one of the elite CEOs at CareQuest, and you've worked with others as well with different personality types. And I'm just curious, as a CFO, how do you build that strategic partnership with the people? Because a lot of people, I've heard recently, people are calling CFOs the deputy CEO.
Yeah.
The right-hand person to the CEO. But what's the magic there?
Yeah, it is being that strategic business partner and thought partner and, the ability to tackle tough things together or the fun things and, whiteboard or brainstorm and really thinking about risks and opportunities of kind of what you're embarking on. I've had the joy of being that strategic thought partner, strategic CFO in really all of my roles since I left PwC, in the late 90s. And it's super rewarding, it's super challenging. But that's the real value of the CFO, in my view. Obviously getting the finances right and, the accounting piece is fine, but it's really the strategic things, whether it's doing an acquisition, whether it's making a decision about a divestiture, which I've been through here at CareQuest as well. And so I think every CEO also comes from different backgrounds, experiences, and they might not be an operational CEO or they might not be a financial CEO. And kind of the balance of what each of you brings and leveraging those skills is what I found to be kind of the most, not only rewarding for me, but the most powerful role of a CFO can be.
That makes sense. So, one thing that intrigued me when I was prepping for the call is the quality of research that your organization does.
Mhm.
And in particular, I saw something that was called Brushing Up on Oral Health, and then the case for expanded health innovation and investment. And can you share a little about some insights to that report and, maybe some others that you think might be intriguing to our audience?
Yeah. So, at the Institute, we publish a ton of research. We view it as one of our biggest assets. And so we have an amazing data analytics and insights team that we leverage to publish a lot of amazing research. But as we think about, investing in oral health, we believe there's a unique opportunity. Not only is it a huge market, a lot of typical investors have, felt it sleepy, or, maybe all you can do is in dental or oral health is, DSO roll-ups. But there's a lot of innovation happening. And as we think about the connection between oral health and overall health, whether it's diabetes or cardiovascular disease, those connections are real. And publishing the data to show that connection and the importance of chronic disease management, and health systems recognizing that, the mouth is part of the body. So not just the payers, but also investors recognizing that there's a huge opportunity. So as we think about AI, as we think about a whole bunch of different aspects to improve quality of care, but also reduce the total cost of care. There's some really, really unique opportunities, and I think we're at this inflection point. So we worked with PitchBook on one report talking about the investment in oral health and why there's a real opportunity, and then also did another report with Rock Health, also talking about why oral health matters and why it's something we can't ignore.
Yeah, it's interesting to think of it as like a hot investment opportunity because, I remember, my dentist. Basically the industry didn't seem to change from the time I was 4 until maybe my 30s, and I had a dentist who was 102 years old, and
Yeah.
or so he seemed to me at the time, and it just didn't seem like a dynamic, changing environment, but it in fact is quite dynamic and quite changing today.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It's been there that, the way many dentists, including probably the one you're referring to, the teaching of dentistry has not changed since, it was founded. But now we are starting to see a ton of innovation, and not just in practice management software, or kind of other opportunities. But you can think about, like I said, AI, and you think about voice recognition and the ability to do things in a more efficient way, and focusing on patient outcomes versus just charging for your cleaning or whatnot.
Well, I think that research you talked about is just amazing. So, but I want to talk a little about the company itself. And I'm curious, obviously, the company's growing and doing really well, and yet you're a CFO. So you're always looking ahead a little bit. So, what do you think some of the biggest challenges and opportunities facing CareQuest for the next few years are?
Yeah, so I think one of the opportunities is on the data side. I mentioned it earlier. We've got a large database, and different data partnerships. And as we think about trying to continue to prove that we can reduce total cost of care and improve patient outcomes, by making sure that medical and dental are integrated, that's a huge opportunity for us. So as we look at expanding our data partners, who we work with, what types of data we have, focused on medical, dental, and social. That, in my view, is one of our biggest opportunities. We also, through our CareQuest innovation partners, the ability to continue to innovate on the industry and look for unique investment opportunities is also really, really important. So those are two of the big things that we are focused on. We're also looking to transform an industry, right? And look at major systems change, and advocating for, expanded benefits, for particularly Medicare and Medicaid. So doing a lot of great work, but certainly there's lots of opportunity as we move forward.
Indeed, it sounds like it. And I'm always curious, unless you're that 1 in 100 company where the CEO is a former CFO, you're probably the only financial expert on the leadership team. So you have a unique role in making sure that the financial strategy and the strategic plan are in alignment. And,
Yeah.
How do you do that in this environment? Again, with the added thing that you are a little bit mission focused,
Yeah.
which doesn't mean not financially prudent. It just means slightly different objectives.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have shareholders, but we are a public charity. So we are beholden, in this case, to the state of Massachusetts. And so we have to be good stewards of our capital, and I wear that hat very proudly and very intentionally. And so as I think about, how to invest our endowment and make sure that we're maximizing our investment returns to be able to fund all of our work, that is always top of mind for me, and making sure that we're doing it in the most efficient and impactful way towards executing on our mission. So sometimes we've got to make hard choices, but how we drive forward our strategic priorities and how we measure the impact of those is really where I am focused.
No, that makes sense. And you mentioned earlier how innovative the company is, and it's always pushing the envelope and transforming in industries. Sounds hard,
It is
to,
hard.
to say the least. But, I'm curious, that's probably not possible without a really thoughtful digital strategy. And so I'm curious, how do you use generative AI and other technologies, not only in finance and accounting, but to give the overall organization a, in for-profit you'd call it competitive advantage, but just to make it the most impactful organization it can, enterprise-wide?
Yeah. Since I started 4 years ago, are really making sure that not only are, in-house tools and technologies, beyond the Microsoft Office suite, but really looking at how do our teams operate? How do they collaborate? There's so many different facets to our organization. So collaboration is key. And so how do we make sure that, there's good data, there's good communication, and the measurement of impact. And that is not easy. And depending on the team, you look at it in different ways. But even on the financial side, we went through a new ERP implementation. We just went live a little over a year ago on that. Integrated our grants tool with that, so we have real time kind of progress on who's in our pipeline for grants, and then where is it in the approval process, and that our grantees can be paid timely. It used to be a very manual process, so it doesn't sound super sexy per se, but these little things make a big difference in allowing you to free up time from things that are labor intensive or manual to automating as much as you can. And that's where we're really focused as we continue to advance. We just implemented a new, planning and forecasting tool, which we're just kind of finalizing now. That was the project du jour for 2024. And so always looking to advance and leverage technology, both to minimize risk, minimize errors, and to create efficiencies and automation.
But yeah, that's it makes sense because I have a friend, he owned a barber shop, and you probably the least digitally savvy, or the business that needs the least digital strategy out there, right? You just men's barbershop, you just come, you tell some inappropriate jokes and you cut the guy's hair, right? So, but with COVID and safety features and stuff like that,
Yeah.
he had to innovate. And if a simple business like that, and he's a shrewd guy, and he's probably well ahead of the curve in his industry. But if he's innovating, then every company is using digital technology to change. But so
Yeah.
I have a question. I wouldn't call it personal, but when you worked at SV, not exactly an industry that was regulated that I know of, and maybe I'm mistaken on that. But the investment industry, it's a little different. But now you're working in an industry that's pretty tightly regulated, and you mentioned that you're beholden to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So how do you deal with that from a financial perspective, and how do you stay ahead of the curve on all of these regulatory challenges that you're facing?
Yeah. So I have amazing team members and amazing chief legal officer who does understand the regulated business. We also own an insurance company, in Massachusetts as well. So there's a whole bunch of different regulatory regimes which we have to comply with, and even HIPAA. People wouldn't think about that necessarily, but we get the data I mentioned. We need to make sure that we're HIPAA compliant. And that we are, privacy and data and other things, that we're compliant with a whole host of regulations. So it's wide, but we make sure that we have great counsel both inside and outside. And we have amazing training. We've got tools and regular trainings and et cetera to make sure that all of our colleagues kind of understand the environment in which we operate.
No, that makes sense. So I wanted to shift gears a little bit and talk about the CFO role generally, or financial leadership. And it's gone through, to me, it went through like an evolution from around the time you and I first became CFOs. It was largely the old school finance and accounting and cost controls and whatnot. And then it slowly and steadily became sort of strategic and leadership and communications. And then with COVID, it suddenly, I often say the evolution became a revolution. But what do you see the direction of the role of the CFO in the next few years? Because, if predictions I made 3 years ago were completely wrong. So I'm
Yeah,
curious what you
well,
think. So,
yeah, COVID obviously changed a lot for all of us. I look at, even just the composition of our employee base. We are now in almost 30 states for a small company. We have employees in that many states. And so that creates a lot of complexity, challenges with respect to hybrid and remote work, continuing to motivate people, making sure that, to your earlier point, the tools and technologies foster that collaboration, even in this continued virtual reality that we find ourselves in. And so, gosh, crystal ball. There AI is, I think, probably one of the biggest opportunities, but also challenges. How do we use it? How do we make sure we understand what it's used for and why? And that, we're using it in the right ways. I think that will be in the next couple of years kind of one of the biggest opportunities as, AI and machine learning continues to evolve. And I see that even in the companies we're investing in, whether it's teledentistry or AI-driven, diagnoses. It's really kind of not removing the role of the human in all of this, but it's really expanding the capabilities, and taking us to new heights. So I think that's probably the biggest thing I see on the horizon.
that sounds good. Well, one of the things with this podcast that I want to do is change the perception that other people have about CFOs and finance and accounting people generally. So I like to ask people about a fun fact or a favorite joke or whatever. And you have one of the best fun facts of anyone I know. So I'm just going to allow you to share that with us.
Yeah, so I guess my fun fact and claim to fame was I was an extra in a movie with Tom Cruise. This was many moons ago, but it was a movie called Taps, and it was filmed near my hometown. And I got to join the Screen Actors Guild and say all of 4 words, and it was a ton of fun. I've had many weeks of filming for a couple of scenes, but it was pretty cool that my parents let me do that and miss school and got to meet Tom Cruise, and he came over to my family's house on Mother's Day for a brunch because he wasn't anybody. This was before risky business.
Oh, he wasn't famous at that point. So, because I know the movie. So if I were to get the movie, are you in the closing credits?
Probably. Yeah.
Geez, that's something I would know for sure
Yeah. I don't
if it
know.
were me.
I've never fact checked that, but
So,
yeah, I'm in a couple different scenes. So
okay.
I'll,
Well,
I'll challenge you to find me.
there's going to be 5,000 people fact checking that once this episode is released. No, that's great. And then another thing that's underrated, but every elite CFO I know discusses it, is the importance of work-life balance.
Yeah.
And I know for you, because you've got a full-time job for this growing, wonderful organization, and you're on, I think you're on 4 boards of directors. And as long as I've known you, you've always done a lot of community service type of work. So you got a lot going on. How do you find time for, other stuff?
Yeah, so I do find time. I've got 2 girls. One is almost 24 and the other one's a freshman in college. So certainly throughout my whole career, I was juggling kind of work-life balance, family commitments, and all that good stuff. And I was fortunate that I was able, to do that. It is a juggle and it is about choices. And so I've had to pare back some of my boards. Right now I'm focused on the portfolio company boards that we're invested in, as well as a couple key nonprofits. I also serve as a strategic advisor on Northeastern's Impact Fund and a couple other things. But you have to be picky and choosy. Your time is limited as much as we like to think it is not. And so you've got to do things that bring you joy. Some things you have a choice over and others you don't, but the things that you do, they've got, in my personal opinion, they have to bring me joy. I don't want them to be a grind. I choose to do things that I can add value and that, like I said, add satisfaction. So that's always been my mantra is, when it's not fun anymore, it's time to move on.
No, that's a great philosophy. We're only here for so many years, so make the most out of them. So, well, I'd like to conclude, and you've had such great success in so many different companies, but is there some advice that you could impart to what I frequently call the next generation of CFOs, and those who are maybe they're in their first CFO role or they're on the cusp of getting one, things
Yeah.
that they should be thinking about as they plan their own career paths?
Yeah. I mean, a couple of things is, take advantage of what is put in front of you. A lot of people think they have to have a defined path and go into a certain type of company or whatever. It may not happen that way. And, you just, opportunities will present themselves and just keep your eyes wide open. And don't be afraid, to take risks. I did that with CMGI at Ventures and, kind of everything along my career path. The other thing I would say is don't be afraid to ask for help. There are so many people out there in your shoes and those that have walked in your shoes, that can share advice, wisdom, be that, bang your head against the wall kind of thing. Even in the networks that you and I talked about, whether it was High Tech Financial Executives Network or any other networking group, there are people out there that have been there, done that, or have the same questions you do. So do not be afraid to ask.
No, that makes all the sense in the world. And Denise, I know you've got a lot going on. You're really busy. So I certainly appreciate you taking the time to join us today. And I'd just love to give you the final word, anything that you'd like to share with the audience.
Yeah, no, there is a ton of different ways that CFOs can add value and have an amazing career. So many different paths, and so embrace the journey, have fun on the ride, and it will all work out.
Strategic leadership isn't just nice to have for today's CFOs. It's a necessity. As the demands of your role evolve, staying ahead means learning from those at the top of their game. Join us at the Spring 2025 CFO Leadership Conference, where finance leaders come together to tackle today's most pressing challenges. Over 3 dynamic days, you'll experience interactive workshops, inspiring panel discussions, and unparalleled network opportunities with peers who understand your world. Hear from top-tier speakers, including CFOs from industry giants like Philo, Conagra Brands, NerdWallet, and OpenText, plus other thought leaders who are shaping the future of finance. And don't miss the Indiana Jones of the FBI as he shares unforgettable leadership lessons from his extraordinary career. Gain actionable strategies, real-world insights, and the tools to elevate your leadership and drive your organization's success. Register now at cfolc.com to take advantage of early bird pricing. And don't forget to use the code ROCKSTAR100 for even more savings. Let's grow, lead, and solve challenges together.
That wraps up this episode of The Secrets of Rockstar CFOs. A huge thank you to our sponsors, Plantful and Travel Bank. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review at rockstarcfos.com. Until next time, rock on.
Thank you for listening to this episode. To continue your exploration of this role that focuses on strategy, leadership, finance, and technology, listen to more episodes of the show at rockstarcfos.com. Join this revolution, episode by episode. Push yourself to achieve great things and unlock the best opportunities available to you. CFOs are creating a legacy, and it's time for you to leave your own unique imprint on the world today. That's all for now. See you on the next one.